Bob, if there is one constant in the universe, it is change. I was reading the bio of our guest today, and Brett has been a champion of so many changes in so many of the districts that he's worked in, and he's got so many initiatives happening right now in his own district. I got to know how he handles this.
You and I were on the same page, and it's not just it. The students are the easy part, right? They're all for change. They all want to do something different. They all want to do something new. You're hanging out with the wrong students, or you're making the wrong changes.
But right. That's exactly it.
Sometimes the teachers, and it's not always the oldest teachers. There's this misconception that it's the oldest or more seasoned teachers who don't want that change, and that's not true. And it's not just teachers. There's a whole community of stakeholders who aren't always first in line for that change for the better.
Absolutely. And the different lenses that change takes when you're looking at it through the student eyes, the faculty's eyes, I think, which is obvious, but staff, parents, alumni, right? There's a lot of that going on. And, I don't think there's a person better to answer that question than Brett. So what do you say we get into this episode? Hey, everyone. Welcome to the show. Our guest today is Dr. Brett Geithman, Superintendent of Larkspur-Corte Madera School District in Larkspur, California. Brett, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate being on the show. So this is I just finished up my 8th year as superintendent here at Larkspur-Corte Madera. We're actually in Marin County, which is about 8 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's where Larkspur is located, within Marin. So right by San Francisco. I think I'm going into my 25th year of education. I've done everything from being a special education paraprofessional, elementary teacher, alternative ed teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent of HR, ed services, now superintendent. I've taught at USC. I've taught at Cal State Long Beach. So all over the place in terms of my career. But I have to say, after finishing up my 8th year here as superintendent, I absolutely love this job. And it's new challenge every day, but it's an exciting place to be.
So it's official. I have the shortest, least impressive resume in this podcast again. I think my streak is unbroken. So, Brett, we know your background, and I got very impressive and concise. You laid it all out there for us quickly.
That was great.
Tell us a little about your school district and the students and the community, number of schools, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So we're actually a small school district. We're what's considered community funded. So in California, you have your basic aid districts, which are community funded, and your LCFF districts. So we're the 10% of California schools that are considered basic aid or community funded, which means that our property taxes exceed what the state minimum is for the per pupil expenditure. So a little bit spills over there. So we get to keep that. So we're very strong community funding. We have 3 schools. We have 1178 students across our 3 schools, K through 8. Again, great community support. We have a foundation that raises $1.5 million a year. We have a parcel tax that also raises $4 million a year. We have bonds as well. So again, a lot of community support around our schools. San Francisco as a whole, as I think most people know, is really a hub for technology, a hub for innovation. And so when we think about our entire learning community, we have some amazing community members and parents who are right in the thick of the innovation that's going on in San Francisco and the greater Bay Area. So it's a really exciting place to be. Plus, you're surrounded by, if you've ever been to Marin County, it's like you're in San Francisco in the middle of the city, you cross the bridge, 80% of our land is national and state park.
Yeah.
So you're surrounded by beautiful redwoods, forests, beaches. It's a pretty phenomenal place to be.
I've been through Marin County. It's gorgeous. It really is a gorgeous place to be. So that's awesome. Well, I think part of the diversity of experiences that you had kind of prior to your superintendency, I think lends to some of the experience that I've seen and read about you. Brett, where you've worked extensively with a variety of instructional and learning models. And a lot of those that I look at seem to be kind of discipline specific, like math specific or reading specific. And so I guess one of my questions is, when you're working with your faculty on these different instructional models, but a student is going through all of those subject areas in a single day, like how do you ensure that there's sort of a consistent learning experience for the student when they're working with teachers who, I think there's greatness in a lot of these instructional models, but there's styles of thinking, associated with these. And if you've got different models, how does that impact students, and how do you tie it all together and create a cohesive experience for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that we've been working on a lot in Larkspur-Corte Madera is creating our vision. It's been over a years long work. We just finalized it. It's on our website, something we're really proud of, but it's Vision 2036. So we're really looking far in
you're
advance.
Reaching out. Yeah.
Right. And really it allows people to dream big, right? Yeah. If you do it too short, people aren't as, ambitious with those types of goals. So then we have a strategic plan that aligns to that. So for the first 5 years, here's what we're going to do that's aligned with that vision. One part of it really speaks to what you're mentioning, Alex, is this idea of, I'd say the through line with the instructional models that we implement here at LCMSD, and that I've also had the fortune to be a part of in other school districts, is really around inquiry-based instruction, right? Like the concept of, when we enter, I look at this a lot with mathematics, but I think it's for any content area, low floor, high ceiling. Low floor meaning making sure that our lessons and our instructional design is accessible to all learners within our classroom, but high ceiling so we can go beyond and go deeper into that content area. So when we think about that, I'd say the through line is that low floor, high ceiling, the cognitive demand, and the inquiry-based instructional models. So students are doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Right. That is our goal. And by doing that, I think you increase the engagement in the classroom, you increase that ownership, and then you also promote student agency. So I think that those are some of the outcomes, right, that come from that type of design. But yes, we have different instructional models for content areas, but there is this through line there.
Great.
Okay.
And so,
go ahead. Go ahead, Brett.
So I think one of those things in thinking about that vision that I mentioned before is one of our goals is to create a series of inquiry-based, interdisciplinary, and a lot of people use project-based learning. Mm-hmm. So we want to call it we don't want to tie ourselves just to PBL. So we're saying inquiry-based learning experiences for each grade level that are multidisciplinary. So that's one of the components of our vision there is like, how do we create more consistency around that and have kind of these very authentic and interesting experiences for every grade level.
Now, perhaps this is some recency bias here, but the world is aglow with AI and conversations on AI. And I don't know if even more so in education, but I think, and I'm the engineer of this group, and you are the educators. So, but I see this is the moment that project-based learning has been waiting for, when we can tailor that instruction and those inquiries, and we have more than just a teacher to answer those inquiries or to help guide students through that. What if you're using AI now? How? If not, how will you? I mean, you're talking out to 2036, so one imagines that AI's got to be in there. Tell us what the future looks like.
Yeah. So if we take a look at our vision as its entirety, we have a technology scope and sequence. So this is something where we take a look at each grade level. These are the critical skills, experiences that students should have that build off of one another. So if I'm a 6th grade teacher, I know that my students have had this variety of experiences K through 5. So now I can build upon that. What our goal is in this next year is now we're layering those AI experiences into that tech scope and sequence. We're updating our digital citizenship components to that as well, because AI brings a whole host of other, digital citizenship type of questions and elements to it. So that's on the horizon for us. In terms of the immediate, last summer, our admin team did a deep dive on AI with a recent graduate from Harvard and Berkeley who happens to be right here in San Francisco. He's amazing. His name's Henry Jin. So he worked with our team and then continued working with our team so that we had a much deeper understanding of what the possibilities are with AI. We ended up forming an AI inquiry group within Larkspur-Corte Madera School District. Pure volunteer, after school, additional work. I mean, I couldn't believe how many people wanted to be a part of it. So we had people from all job classifications. So
Cool.
Whether it's paraprofessionals, teachers, administrators. So there's a really nice, diverse group of educators in the room. And we used what was called, there's a market map that was put out. So when you look at AI use case, then you can see what AI tools fall within those different use cases. So we had like an accordion process of like, hey, I'm really interested in this use case. I'm going to go try out these different AI tools and I'm going to come back and report to the group as to like what my experience was with that particular AI tool. We used the Hanover Research rubric to evaluate those different AI tools, really looking at safety and security, as well as overall use case and function. Ultimately, where we landed on is we're going to be using BRISK AI as a pilot for next year. And so if you aren't familiar with BRISK, one of the features that we really appreciate about it is one, it's very high levels in terms of security and data privacy. So that's, paramount. That's like a non-starter if you aren't right in the AI space. The second piece is we are a Google Suite district and BRISK is right within the Google Suite. So when you're in your Drive or you're on a YouTube video or whatever, you'll see the little BRISK icon and you don't need to toggle back and forth between an AI tool and what you're actually working on within your G Suite or within your space. There's also a lot of student control so that students could start, and we're going to build out what student experiences we'd like to see. But I think AI is super exciting. I'm very fired up about AI, so I've done a lot of work with it. I think it's something that, people might be scared of what's going to happen, in the world, just as probably people were scared of the iPhone when it came out or the internet. But I think this is something we need to embrace. Our students are going to use it regardless. So how do we teach it responsibly? And how do we teach them the right ways to use AI to really enhance their learning and their work?
That's great. And so your committee sort of lined up here are the tools and here's the ways that we're going to do that. You've set your policies and guidelines around that as well. And then will this upcoming year be the year that you implement this, or have pilots already been happening?
The pilot will be this year. So our AI inquiry group was more of the kind of the grassroots group that is just going to give some things to try and really use that Hanover Research rubric to evaluate specific tools, which narrowed the focus down to BRISK. Yeah. So next year will be the pilot. We'll have some training for our teachers, continue to gather feedback, and again, update that tech scope and sequence so it's really clear as to what experiences do we want students to have at each grade level.
Okay, cool. Can I ask about, sorry to jump in, Bob.
Sure.
He's not really sorry.
For all of the right reasons, there have been a lot of great discussions about the role that AI plays in the classroom. Mm-hmm. I'm imagining with the diversity of people that you pulled into your planning group and your collaborative work on the Hanover rubric that you used, are you also looking at how you will be using AI at a district administrative level?
Absolutely. So that's where Henry really came into play. So last summer, using it for data analysis. I have a bunch of assistants that I have running in my own AI space. And so looking at how do we utilize assistants? How do we share assistants across our admin team? how do we use this in terms of there's some legal aspects you can take a look at in terms of AI. But then also on the creative front, like what are some creative ways that we can use AI to elevate the work and allow us to focus on those deeper problems as an admin team. And so, I've found we've definitely had some trailblazers on our admin team. And, it's nice to have somebody fresh from the AI space guide us along. So we have coaching hours with him. We've had full workshops with him. He's done mini workshops with our teachers, but it's been a really great experience. And I'm looking forward to even digging in more with him. Next month, we're going to talk about some automation. So anyway.
Ooh, cool. Okay.
Now, you have to calm down, Alex. It's my turn.
I know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
We don't actually take turns. If you've ever listened, we do not take turns. It's Alex, Bob, Alex. So I'm just curious about when you came to your staff, administrators, teachers, or whatever. I've noticed in my work, I still work in schools every day, and in administrative meetings and cabinet meetings, there is still a not insubstantial portion of educators who see AI as Skynet. It's the end of the world. And by 2036, they're going to come back and destroy the world with AI. How did you approach that? And what sort of percentage did you see of that kind of resistance?
Yeah, I think, when I think about our approach to AI is like our approach to a lot of other initiatives that we've done, whether it's been LCM or other school districts have been a part of and been a part of the implementation of something. I think we start first with an invitation. Here's something in our space. This looks pretty interesting. Here's some more information about it. Would you like to dig into this concept more? So when we went out to our teachers, one of the first things that we did, we had some of course, teachers that were way into it, that were already doing some things on their own. And as we got caught wind of that and had more conversations, Henry, Kyle Shaw, the principal, Neil Cummins, and myself did a quick 45-minute presentation at a district-wide staff development day. We said, hey, this is AI. Here's some cool things it can do. And left it and just said, hey, there might be an AI inquiry group where you could join, learn more about this, explore some things, take it or leave it. This is just an invitation to check it out and see what you think. And I was shocked at the number of teachers and staff members that were really interested in it, and some of which who I wouldn't have predicted, right? And so I think that taught me something as well, right? About going into that space. In terms of the resistance, I think that there's definitely some resistance. Even more so by some parents. I think the parents there's some fear there, like my child won't develop the skills to be successful in the world. And so, right, if they're using AI, especially at school, and what that looks like. And so that's why we want to be very clear as what AI might look like in the classroom. But I think with the proper guardrails, and so at our last board meeting, we shared what the AI guidelines are for students and for staff. I think the proper guardrails, the proper communication, the proper safeguards for children when we do have them use AI, I think it will lend to that success. And I feel like we've had a very thoughtful process. So in terms of the pushback, I haven't felt too much, but yet we'll see in this next year where, this pilot's coming out and we'll see who engages. But there is some fear, right? There's some fear that this is going to take over some aspects of teaching, where I'd like to reframe that as to this can enhance some areas of teaching and learning. And this is a tool like many other tools that we have at our disposal.
I'm curious because, so in my career, change management has sort of been, like 90% of a tech person's job. Right. And so when we try to do new things and we put it out there and we see who's interested, we get a lot of even if there's a diversity in their background, it's the same message, it's the same kind of voice. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, and just from what I'm gathering from you, my guess is you've probably done this, but I want to be a little more deliberate and explicit in how did you get diverse perspectives in your inquiry group not just the I like this, I want to learn about this, and I'm a parent. I like this, and I want to learn about this, but I'm a teacher. But like I'm not so sure that this is something that we should do, or I have grave concerns. How are you pulling some of the contrarian and different voices into your inquiry group and process?
Yeah, good question. I think the inquiry group was really focused on those who wanted to explore more.
Okay.
So I think there was already kind of a passion. And I think
Okay.
to gather the diverse group of job classifications that were represented, I think that had to do with how we presented AI to the staff as a whole. So it was, yes, of course, it was teacher focused, but also we showed some things that would be interesting for paras or interesting for office managers and those different pieces. I think to capture the concerns around whether it be parents or others, I think part of it has been when we've gone out and had some staff updates on this. So we've had, sequential types of updates on the inquiry group and AI tools. So we've gathered some feedback that way. Next year, what's a big part of our overall plan is with that text scope and sequence, there's a parent education component.
Great.
And we're even looking at the possibility of having a board workshop specifically dedicated to AI. So that because when we brought up those expectations of students and of staff, some board members had a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
And I think they represent the community very well in asking those questions. And so how can we provide more forums for people to feel comfortable, to share their concerns? And we may not have all the answers at hand, but then create that vehicle to ensure that we share that back. And I think that that's something that we really strive to do here at LCM is we might not have the answer right away, but what we're going to do, we're going to create an FAQ on our website, or we're going to create a video follow-up that's going to answer your questions, or we're going to make sure this is in an article or our next newsletter, or we're going to host a subsequent coffee chat so we can really share this update and gather more feedback. It really, I think, goes back to that vision I was talking about earlier, that vision process that we engaged in. Gosh, we had, I think, over 1,200 inputs into that process. It was one of the most actively participated stakeholder engagement processes that the district's had in decades.
Oh.
So it was really exciting.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about this technology scope and sequence that you guys are building. How are you building it? What kinds of things are going into that?
Sure. So the tech scope and sequence, it's been in place for a number of years. It's just time for a refresh. But part of it is really looking at what are the essential skills and experiences that students should have at each grade level that is age appropriate, so that you can build. So the idea of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So if I am a second grade teacher, I know the students that are coming into my classroom have had these experiences in kindergarten, first grade. I don't have to reteach. I may do a little refresher on it, but they've had those experiences. Now I can take it to the next level. That's the idea. So there's that piece. The other component in it is around digital citizenship. And so this is really, really essential and is, of course, I feel it just keeps growing, right? The different aspects that you need to cover in terms of digital citizenship. So we're updating that piece. And then the new element that we're going to add to it as well is really around technology recommendations, like screen time recommendations by grade level. So what is appropriate? And then when we think about the classroom experience, how much time should kids be spending on screens? And I think one of the challenges that we've seen, I think there's always the pros and cons to any innovation. And yes, I love technology. I love the fact that when you do a curriculum adoption, a lot of it's online. So if there's an update, it just happens, right? You don't need to reprint and get the next edition of the textbook, et cetera. But the problem with that is it creates this dependency on screens,
right?
To access the curriculum. So we want to be very deliberate and responsive to what is that appropriate screen time by age group, and how can we create experiences that support the overall development of students with that appropriate tech balance. So that's a big piece that we're looking to evolve the scope and sequence to.
Can I ask one follow-up question, Bob? How are you? So I'm sure research is driving like the appropriate use, but how are you guys determining kind of what is the appropriate level for a second grader? What's the appropriate technology skills, essential skills that they need in second grade with regards to technology? And how are you said, you're adjusting citizenship questions. How are you adjusting those? How are you coming to this?
So I guess I'll go to the first component of that, of identifying the skills and experiences by grade level. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is this backwards mapping. So looking ahead, right? So when our 8th graders move on to high school, what are the skills? And so in our vision, what we have is the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that they'll have leaving us for high school and beyond. So these are the essentials, right? And so if we take the tech scope and sequence in the same way of when we have our students who are exiting 8th grade, what are the tech skills that they'll need to be successful in high school and beyond, and then backwards map that. And so there's some component of that. There's also a large component of talking to teachers about it, right? They know what their students are going to have. Like, they know what their expectations are at the grade level. And they also know what their students, what are those stretch areas that we want our students to stretch to, right? Or to strive towards. And so I think talking to teachers, looking at that backwards planning, I think that really drives that piece there. There's also the ISTE standards. So we've taken a look at those, and incorporated those as well. So there's other external resources that are really important to that design. In terms of digital citizenship, we look at a variety of different sources for that. Common Sense Media has been a helpful tool. And so looking at whether it be continue looking at Common Sense Media or other tools as well. But how do we we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to this digital citizenship. There are people with deep expertise on that. Right. And so what we want to do is leverage those experts that are in alignment with our district vision to really roll out and support our teachers and students.
Great. Thank you.
Now, and the process to get this accomplished, right? Because there's a piece there. We realize that this takes additional teacher time. This takes additional staff time. We're strong believers in building committees and leadership teams. And so we have a technology leadership team. We're going to have a AI lead at each school site next year. Teachers have already applied for that. And with the AI lead themselves, they'll receive additional pay for that school year to then not only be a part of the tech committee, to update the tech scope and sequence with the team, but then also to deliver some professional development, whether it be to whole staff and also as a coaching model. So we feel like that's really important. If you want something to be successful, you have to have the supports in place.
Brett, let's bring this back to the important stuff. Technology. Enough of that. No, kidding. This is a question about technology. And obviously you have put a great deal of thought into where your district wants to go with that technology and the plan. I guess my question about that plan is, the last thing you mentioned, more recency bias here in my question, is that you're going to have an AI teacher, somebody who gets a supplemental extra pay. But not just about that, about hardware and software that the district is purchasing and the investments in people and training. How do you measure the return on investment on those investments that you've made? To how is it affecting student learning? How is it supporting it? How is it closing gaps in equity that you may have in your enrollment, your population?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the features that I noticed right off the bat when coming into Larkspur-Corte Madera is this has been a very tech forward type of school district. And so our teachers have and students have a lot of technology at their fingertips every day, not using all day, but accessible, right, as those tools. So our senior director of ed services and technology, Daniel Norbutis, he's designed not only our tech replacement cycle to ensure that the hardware is working properly. Devices are getting, like this summer, we're refreshing all teacher MacBooks, but so that those devices are working for teachers, so that that's not a barrier for them in terms of instruction. One thing that we do is we're really invested in bringing data to action. So here are data that we've collected. Now with these data, what are we going to do about it, right? And so some of the things that come into play in terms of data is we look at our student outcomes, right? We look at our student groups. So we're looking at CASP, we're looking at iReady, we're looking at DIBELS. We take a look at, let's see, we have a LCAP survey, so local control and accountability survey. So that happens every single school year. We've done more extensive studies based upon specific needs. So we've had focus groups of current and former students and parents and teachers and high school to gather information on specific initiatives to then drive what that next change is. But what I'd have to say in terms of, is technology making an impact on student learning? That was your question, Bob. And I think that in some aspects, we've been able to measure that through specific programs that we've been using. So taking a look at iReady and MyPath, taking a look at Lexia and seeing the pre and post student data based upon the implementation of that. But I also have to say it's a systems approach, right? So there's so many different variables that come into play. And one thing that I really like to stress, and I get this from the Coatson Foundation, which is in Los Angeles. I got to work with them extensively when I was in Long Beach Unified and Los Alamitos Unified. But there's an art to teaching, right? Like you can know every single thing about learning theory and have all the tools at your disposal. However, if you don't have that art when it comes to really being responsive to your students, engaging your students, inspiring that creativity and that drive to learn more, you won't see change, or you won't see the change at the level that you want to. So I like to talk about that balance. I think that's important.
We are about at our time, but Bob, do you want to kind of bring us home with our sort of ending question?
So it's funny that you say that, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently I've hung around Alex too long, because I literally just made a note in case you had more questions that I'm like, I'm going to come back to this. So totally, this is the oddest thing to hear from the engineer of the group. That art of learning is key, right? That's it. So Alex, I'm going to win this already, right?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay. We agree. I probably already have won this, but Brett, we do ask, wait, I got to set this up a little better. The art of learning, right? That when you were saying that, I thought of two of the best teachers I ever had, because they had that art. It didn't matter what tools. My supposition is that everybody has that teacher or in their background or more. Would you tell us a bit about your favorite teacher or the teacher that had the biggest impact on you?
On me as an educator.
Or as a person?
Yeah,
as a person.
Yeah, gosh, it's hard to pick. There's a couple kind of, going in and out of my.
He said hard to pick means multiple.
It's hard. Yes, for sure. I'm going to go to a teacher that inspired me early on in my teaching career. Actually, the reason why I became an educator in the first place.
That would be wonderful, wouldn't it, Alex?
Let's do that one. So, my wife, she gave me this book called The Freedom Writers. I had just finished up my BA. I was reading that. I was ready to start a grad program in psychology. But she said, "Hey, this is a good read. Check it out." So I read it. Ended up doing some substitute teaching and kind of in the meantime, and thought that was fun. Started my psychology program. And ended up within the 2 weeks you could get your money back, right? So I ended up withdrawing. And that was at the time, especially in Los Angeles, where you could be an emergency permit teacher in a second. So I withdrew on a Thursday. On Monday, I was teaching kids, right? Like that's how quickly it happened. But it was because of that book. It was because of the Freedom Writers. It was because of, and some early experiences being a substitute teacher that it kept drawing me back as like, yeah, I'm really interested in psych, but I feel like I could really have a big impact in terms of students. So then that first year, I ended up calling the author of that book, Aaron Gruwell. I was in Long Beach. She was in Long Beach. I said, hey, Erin, I read your book. It's amazing. It inspired me to become a teacher. I'm right down the street from you in Long Beach. Can you help me out? And she did.
Wow.
And so she came and she was a mentor. And so she, I think of those early experiences of like those teachers who could bring that really strong connection, who bring out, I love writing. Like writing, I think is such an important skill, right? To develop. And Erin is phenomenal at that. And so just the fact that here she is, who then they eventually made a movie about, right? She has this book. She's,
right.
She took the time to reach out and spend some time with me as a new teacher, coach me, and mentor me early on in my career. And I have to say, it generally made a huge difference in my entire career. And I owe it to her.
Alex, for those people who are listening, I want to point out that you can tell Brett is by his body language. This is meaningful. This is life-changing. I know that feeling,
transformation.
And that is exactly what I say. Everybody, whether they're an educator or not, because I'm not, I've spent 21 years now in education, but I don't pretend to be an educator. I don't stand up in front of a class, but I think everybody has that. And Alex will tell you, I wasn't even much of a student. Actually, I would tell you I wasn't much of a student.
But Bob will tell you he wasn't much of a student.
Right. So that is a perfect story to end this episode on.
That was great. Brett, thanks so much for joining us. This was a really fun episode. This was a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. I love being on this. So thank you both for the invite.
Well, that was a fun episode. I mean, it's like everything's perfect in Marin.
Right. I suspect that's not it, but there are lots of things going well there. And I can see why. See why with a leader like Brett.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm not even going to ask you. I'm going to jump in and share my favorite thing about that episode. When you asked him who his favorite teacher was, I don't know that you never explicitly asked for who your favorite teacher was, like in your elementary or middle school, high school years, but he went straight to somebody that he has learned the most from in his professional growth. And I love that. I love that. First off, it was just an amazing story, right? But I think we all should be thinking about, like, we're all lifelong learners. Who are our teachers now, right? Who are we learning from and growing from? He got my wheels spinning when he gave that answer, and I just love that.
It's funny you say that. I intermix. There have been times where we've had conversations and people have heard about my favorite teachers or the two teachers who had the biggest impact on me. But we also spoke once about people who had an impact without being a teacher. And that was a person that I worked for in my late 20s and early 30s. And she had a big impact on me. And she was a teacher of mine and had no education. She worked in the automotive industry and wasn't a teacher at all, but yet a teacher. And as you were talking just now, Alex, I was thinking, who are my teachers now? And I think I hate to say this, but Alex, you are one of my teachers. I've learned quite a bit from you over the last 4 years that we've been together in business, in doing a podcast, and in other items. And I hope that our audience has such luck to have such good teachers still, even as they move beyond your traditional student age.
Yeah, I think there's that I think was the big sort of lesson to pull. And I think about, like, maybe 2 or 3 people in our company actually listen to this. And if any of them do, and they're part of our leadership team, they have heard me say my slogan for the last 3 years in my professional growth has been, be like Bob. Yeah. And so I say it in our leadership, in our executive meetings all the time. So another great episode and a lot of fun, and I think some good learning. So until next time, my friend.